At 18, Mary Grace stood at the edge of the long dirt road that led to her future. Her small worn bag hung from her hand, and her heart pounded so hard she feared it might burst from her chest. The distant mountains glowed orange under the setting sun, and the wind carried a dry whisper, like the land itself was warning her to turn back. But she couldn't. She'd been given away, still untouched, still barely a woman, promised to a widowed rancher she'd never met. Jacob Walker, 38, father of 3, a man whose wife had died only 1 year ago. Mary's father had said it was an opportunity, a blessing, a chance to ease her family's debt. She'd nodded as though she understood, though inside she was breaking apart. The wagon that had brought her from town creaked away, leaving her alone at the ranch gate. The house stood tall but lonely, its white paint chipped by sun and time. A barn stood off to the left, and beyond it, endless acres of land. Horses grazed in a far pasture. From the porch, a tall figure approached, boots steady, eyes dark under the brim of his hat. Jacob Walker. His gaze was not unkind, but it was heavy, like a man who carried more than his share of burdens. He looked at her as though measuring her soul. "You're Mary," he said quietly. "Yes, sir." Jacob is fine. His voice held no emotion. Just a statement, calm and steady. He took her bag, gestured toward the door. No welcome, no smile. The children appeared in the doorway. The eldest, a boy about 15 with wary eyes. Beside him stood 2 girls, one 11, one 7. They clung to each other, and Mary felt their distrust like a cold breeze. This was not a home. This was a wound still bleeding. That night, Jacob showed her to a room that had once been his wife's sewing room. There was a bed, a small dresser, and a window overlooking the barren hills. "You'll be safe here," he said, and for the first time, she heard a crack in his voice. "I won't ask anything of you except honesty and work. The children, they still mourn." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "And you," he added gently. "I don't mourn," she whispered. "But I am afraid." He lowered his head. "So am I." He left, closing the door softly. She lay awake, expecting him to return, to claim his rights as her husband. But the house stayed silent except for the muffled sobs of a child down the hall. Jacob never came. Days passed, each one folding into the next. Mary rose with the sun, helped cook breakfast, tended the chickens, cleaned the kitchen, and tried to speak gently to the children. They did not speak back. At supper, the family sat in heavy silence. Jacob asked the children about the ranch chores, their lessons. They answered in one-word murmurs. No one asked Mary anything. She felt invisible, yet she noticed every detail. Jacob always sat at the end of the table, the place of responsibility. His hands were rough, knuckles scarred from years of work. His eyes often drifted to the empty chair across from him, the one that once belonged to his wife. One morning, she found the youngest girl, Emma, crying in the barn. Mary knelt beside her. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Emma wiped her eyes stubbornly. "You're trying to take Mama's place. But you can't. You don't even know how to braid my hair right." Mary hesitated, heart aching. "You're right. I'm not your mama, and I won't ever try to be. But I would still like to learn how you like your hair." Emma stared at her, confused. "Why?" "Because someone should still braid it." That was the first time Emma let her touch her without flinching. Trust did not come quickly. The eldest, Luke, remained stiff and distant. The middle girl, Clara, avoided eye contact. But day by day, Mary became part of the rhythm of the house. She fixed Emma's doll, stitched a tear in Clara's dress, and brought Luke cool water while he worked the fence line. Jacob watched quietly. When they did speak, it was about ranch work. But sometimes, late in the evening, he would step out onto the porch where Mary sat stitching by lantern light. "It's going to be a dry season," he'd say. Or, "There's a new calf in the barn." Simple words. But beneath them, there was something unspoken growing, something fragile and real. One evening, a storm rolled in without warning. The wind howled, and thunder cracked like the sky was breaking open. Mary rushed to gather sheets off the line as rain began to pour. A bolt of lightning struck the far pasture, spooking the horses. Jacob ran toward the stables, shouting for Luke to follow. Mary didn't think. She just ran. Inside the barn, a terrified mare reared up, nearly kicking Jacob. Mary grabbed a rope, her hands trembling, and spoke softly to the horse, using the gentle whisper her father had taught her. The horse slowly calmed, lowered its head, and allowed Jacob to take the lead rope. Jacob turned to Mary then, truly looked at her. Not as a girl forced upon him. Not as a replacement, but as someone standing beside him in the storm. Soaked to the bone, hair clinging to her cheeks, she expected him to turn away. Instead, he reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Thank you," he murmured. No one had ever said those words to her with such reverence. After that night, something shifted. The children began to speak to her at meals. Clara asked if Mary could teach her how to sew. Luke silently fixed her door when the hinge broke. Emma began crawling into her bed at night during storms. But Jacob remained distant, respectful, but careful. Until one evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, he invited her to ride out to the ridge with him. They rode in silence, the air turning cool as shadows lengthened. At the top of the ridge, he dismounted and helped her down. Their hands lingered. "I want to be honest with you, Mary," he said quietly. "I never wanted another wife. I don't know how to love again. My heart still remembers her." Mary's throat tightened. "I understand. I did not expect anything." He nodded, looking out over the land. "But this house is no longer in mourning because you walked into it. You gave them back laughter. And you gave me back peace." Tears blurred her vision. "I did nothing but care. That is everything." He stepped closer. The wind tugged gently at his coat. His eyes, once full of sorrow, now held something else, something warm. "Mary," he said softly, as though her name alone carried a prayer, "I don't ask this of you as a duty, but as a man who is beginning to hope again. May I hold your hand?" Her answer came not in words, but in the way her fingers slipped into his, like they had always belonged there. From that day on, the house changed. Not quickly, not dramatically, but quietly, like spring waking the earth. Jacob began to smile. The children began to laugh. And Mary, once given away like a burden, found herself rooted into a life she had chosen with her heart. 6 months passed before Jacob came to her room and knocked gently at the door. "Mary," he said, his voice low, "we were married by law. But I ask now if you would accept me by heart." She turned to face him. The lantern light flickered across his face. She stepped closer. "Yes," she whispered, "not because I was given, but because I give myself." And in that moment, the past no longer haunted the ranch. A new life had begun, one not forged by arrangement, but gently, beautifully grown out of healing. Jacob kissed her then, softly, reverently, as though she were a miracle. And to him, she was. What happened next shocked everyone in town, not because scandal arose, but because of the kind of love that bloomed. Not loud, not rushed, but true. For in the wide, quiet land beneath the endless sky, a girl once given away became the heart of a home. And a grieving man found joy again, not in forgetting his past, but in finding peace in his future. Beside her, forever.